now we can record if you haven't already. All right, so we are doing comprehensive literacy for all, and this is self-directed reading. And there were some really good things in here, and then I was left with some questions, actually. So I'm hoping to get clarity from you. So I'm sure that that is great leadership on my part. But we'll make it through. Let's see. So it just starts off by talking about all the different ways to have print available. And I really just liked all the ways they talked about. Just, it's not just books. I mean, noticing just that books, just straight up books is only one of this whole list of things. And so thinking about how to build your library to include all these things, and so that you're matching kind of the interest level of so many different types of kids in your class. And then, figure out. And then the different genres. And I was realizing that I'm drawn to some and don't use very much of the other. Some of it might be because there's not always a lot written at the age level of the kids I'm seeing, but there is so many different things to look at here. And I have a friend. Well, she is a friend, but I have a little girl who really rips books unless they're cookbooks. And she came to mind as I was reading all this, because I was thinking, there are books that she just feels are sacred and won't rip them up. And she's very gentle, and she looks through them, and she'll find something that has a picture and she'll take it to her mom, like, let's do this. But I mean, you give her Brown Bear and it's a rip. And she's a pretty little girl. So I thought it was a good example of thinking about how only because that book is available in the home, and she was founded on the bookshelf that was down on the little kitchen island, that we learned that about her. And so that example came to mind as I was looking through all the different kinds of both the types of books and the genres. I was like, oh yeah, this is something to consider. And there may be kids that just don't seem interested in books. And I feel like that just means we haven't landed on their jam, their thing. So building a classroom, for me, I was thinking it's really hard as a private practitioner. I don't know how to have a library this big, but I know as we're looking at classrooms, your budget is real as well. And some of you are, SLPs or specialists, so you don't have your own library, and you might be thinking about the libraries in your preschool classrooms or in your special ed rooms, and how can you help support that? So they did list that there are some mini grants. I wondered if anyone on here had successfully gotten grants to get books in classrooms. Okay, I'm going to guess that that's a no, because they wrote about it in there and I didn't know about it either. So I'm wondering if that's to look into.
I've done it through like our school district, our school PTA. Depending on what school you're at, sometimes the PTA will have a little grant. And we've done that before.
Oh, that's a great idea. The PTA. That wasn't even listed, I don't think.
And Sari, do you remember the group that Barb, it was a grant for Clicker, but just the same, it was a literacy, their focus was on literacy.
Oh, right. And she did, she got a grant to make adapted books.
Yeah.
But I don't remember. Oh, it was, I think it might have been either the Boeing, the folks, I can't remember, the retired Boeing folks, or the Rotary.
Keeping an eye out, both commercial and like our casino here every year, people are writing grants for education and they get some funding. And then commercial companies and writing a little description and seeing what happens.
And I was at Goodwill yesterday dropping off some things because everyone's been trapped at home and they've been, going through their stuff. And they were saying that like their pretty much giving stuff away for as cheap as they possibly can just to keep up with the volume. And I wondered if, this summer, this right around now is a good time to just go get, 5 books for $1 at the Goodwill and stuff, because people have felt like their kids are not interested in that book anymore, or they've outgrown that type of book. That may or may not be true, but either way, to our benefit, that those places are, that people are looking around their homes and getting rid of stuff. And so it's helping us out a lot. I don't know that yard sales are going to be big this summer. I feel like there's going to be a lot of concerns about that. So, but I think Goodwill might be a good idea. I think you could go and pick it up and do your own sanitizing and find a lot there for really cheap. So
someone mentioned Girl Scout troops had done a project to get books for students. And then libraries, our library, it seems like every year it's coming, buy books for cheap.
Mm-hmm. Donors Choose, someone mentioned. Buy Nothing group, if you have one.
So they don't have to be brand new, I guess is the point, And again, even things like cookbooks, those are at Goodwill too. Okay. So this quote stood out to me, and this was again from Erin Warren from another book study that I was on. It said, the main reason for maintaining a diverse collection is to maximize the opportunity for all students to find something to read that connects with their topical interests and text preferences, which change over time and with experience. And I think that's really important too. It is helpful for a new teacher to know that this kid really likes Nate the Great or Amelia Bedelia. But it is also our job to say, who's also a really funny character is, and not just let them get stuck on the one character or the one thing. And I think we see that with little kids. I think, well, he likes anything Mickey Mouse. And then you meet him in 8th grade and you're still doing Mickey Mouse and you wonder, did we attempt to expand beyond the character? So I think we take the text preferences and we acknowledge that a natural progression would be that it would change over time. The text is of no use if the child will not read it. True. It holds true if the child cannot read it. And that's where I think it's hard. I think since it's not a sequence, right? Since we're doing self-directed reading even before they have strong sight words, then I'm not sure how we stay true to all of the pieces of what they're talking about. But maybe that's when self-directed reading looks more like audiobooks, or looks more like turning the pages, or it looks more like more support, but they still have time alone with the text. And we've modified it to the point where they're not taxing their, we're not every single word is something they don't know. Anyone have anything to say about this idea? So they mentioned the 5-finger test or the rule of thumb. I just thought I'd throw this out there. I don't know if everyone knows this one or not, but it's what to do. You pick a book and on any page, and basically if you get to 5 words that you don't think the kid will know, then it might be harder than they should be reading. It's an oldie but goodie, and I think that a lot of teachers know this, and so it's an opportunity for us to say, and that 5-finger rule that you use is perfect, or it's an opportunity to say what you're already doing or what you already know applies to this as well. And I also think then that the reverse is true, that if every single word is a sight word they already know, do we want to move up to expand a few more words? Sorry, something in my eye.
Brenda, I think, did they have a different idea about the 5-finger rule in the book? I'm trying to remember.
They did have a little bit of a different talk about it. In fact, I was going to pull that because I have it here. Just a second.
They were kind of saying like to not be discouraged by it, right? Or that if you have 1 or 2 words. I can't remember.
So apply this test to your own reading. Suppose you pick a book and find 4 unknown words by the time you reach the bottom of the page, and you keep reading and you find 6 or 7 by the time you're reading the second page. Your comprehension of the text is plummeting because it doesn't. So they're saying that five words unknown on one page might be too many. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think they were saying that this is a common rule that people use, but to change it, maybe a new rule of thumb would be that maybe it's just a few words. I think I took that, but I don't have my book right with me right now.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
And I made a comment about this last time. Or Brenda, I'm left with some questions about, there's a big push in the public schools to give students with disabilities access to the general ed content, yet we're also faced with finding the just right reading level. And so in the past, we've always taken, like, let's give them a different set of level books at their level, but exclude them from that general ed content because it's too hard. So I think the job for us is to figure out, someplace in the middle, because maybe there's a way they can access that content with some adaptations, or maybe they just look at the pictures. Maybe they take a paragraph and it's kind of filtered down to their level a little bit and they can do something, but somehow how can they still access the same content or similar content to their peers without going to a separate library? So that's my eternal question, even though I understand this 5 rule thumb makes total sense developmentally. But as far as inclusion,
I know, and I think it's important that we have specific vocabulary instruction so that general ed text is not so hard. And sometimes we don't want to do vocabulary like eruption or things like that where we think it's too hard, and then by the time they're in 8th grade, they're really far behind on the vocabulary. So I think that that making sure that vocabulary isn't too hard in some of those upper grades comes into play at a much younger level, that we need to start making sure that they're exposed to age appropriate vocabulary from the get-go, because that vocabulary builds on more vocabulary,
And speaking also to Rosa's talking about, it seems like self-directed reading is something, and topics they're choosing, types of books they're interested in. It isn't that we're not giving access to the general ed curriculum and content at that level, but for self-directed reading, there's more freedom to be going into other subject matters, other levels, but you can still have times where they're having access to that gen ed content at a higher.
Good point.
Yeah.
But thinking of this 5-finger rule, it may not be a rule across all text, maybe for independent reading for sure, but how do we up the ante a little bit to give them, to expect, it's kind of like assuming competence and assuming the best rather than but also giving them choice. So it's just a balance. I'm just like, there's 2 sides there to think about.
Yeah, and I think that this chapter in particular is on self-directed reading, and it's rare that a child would self-direct through a textbook, but it's possible. Something to think about, I agree. This is another one from Melissa Warren, and it's just making sure that engagement is there. And so use simplified and wordless text, use predictable text, teach students a different rule of thumb for gauging text difficulty, which is what was the next slide. Sorry, I didn't remember that I wrote that on the next slide. Facilitate students' reading of just right books and conduct read alouds. And I think that's hard when I think about my population that's nonverbal, but I definitely think there's a lot of verbal kids in special ed that can participate in actually reading aloud their own texts. Then they jump into like, how would you organize this? And as I was looking at different classrooms and how they organize things, and if you just go to Pinterest, you'll be overwhelmed about it, yeah. But a lot of systems are by reading level, at least and especially in kindergarten. And I understand why they would do that. I just don't know if we end up pigeonholing our kids into a certain type of genre, you know, where it's not, where they don't really get that extra text stuff. And what about categorizing things by genre, but then the risk is picking a book that's not at their level, right? But perhaps if we do some kind of genre and they pick a hard book, so they pick Harry Potter, and you go, whoa, that's not quite where you're at, but I'm wondering if you like magic, and then you can go the other way. So I don't know. I know it's easier to just be like, they're a level G and they're a C and all that, those kindergarten things. But I just wondered what you guys thought about organization. And first of all, if you're not the classroom teacher, you probably don't have a whole lot to say in this anyways, but I just wonder how that landed for people. No one wants to weigh in on this.
Well, I know when I was a kid, I never went to the level that the teachers told me to. I mean,
Yes.
so, you know, the levels for me almost like, well, I don't have to do that. I can read any book I want. So you know, I can see where having at least part of the books just be really open to whatever one of my preschool teachers every week, you know, she has a, you know, one of those, you know, like a book stand, and she just puts a whole bunch of different books all around the theme of the week, but they're a real variety of things. And it's really interesting to watch the kids, which books they go and pick during the times that, you know, she has it there. So when they're waiting for different things, they just pick a book to sit and wait. And I love that they can just pick any book they want.
Yeah, and you know, I think about that, and it requires ambulation, right? So I'm wondering, I know that I have a girl who was 16 and she had the best aid, and she was like, you know what? I just took her to the public school and we walked down to public library, and we walked down every aisle of the library, and then she completely lit up, and it was about gaming and video games, which she had never done, but her brother played video games. And so then they started looking at books about video games, and they started to wonder if she was actually visually engaged in those video games when her brother was doing it, and could we adapt those games? And that's coming to mind as you're saying that. Like, I never went to where they went. Well, that's because you just could walk to a different area, right? So it was like, I wonder if we keep that in mind, that, you know, in order to physically pick out a book, that some of our kids can't do that. And so they are at the mercy of us putting things in front of them, and even a closed set, right? Look at the one you want. So I think we have to be sure that they truly have access to all the different genres, and explaining what those are, and seeing when they light up when certain things come up. And I have another girl who did that with Harry Potter, and mom was like, this is going to be too hard. And I said, well, she can't read it, and it's not self-directed reading for her, but she was like 85-90% accurate on reading comprehension when Harry Potter was read to her, and she's eye gaze. So that's pretty much 100% when you consider the access method. And so I realized too that, you know, sometimes I'll be talking to a parent and I'll be starting to list types of books, and they'll light up at something, and I realize, oh, that's an interest for you. So we do have to think about you know, not only how do we organize it, but how do we present it in a way that all those with a variety of access methods can actually make those choices.
I have a kiddo that I did similar with in the library. He gets on a topic, like right now it's sharks, but it used to be the solar system. And so we go back and forth between the two, but I took him to the library, and I'm like, okay, we're just going to start pulling books out, and you're going to tell me when we get to one that's not sharks or the solar system. And it it really helps to try and figure out what will interest him.
Right, right, right.
So we have some comments in the chat. One person saying, of the self-contained classrooms I work in, one uses a big bookshelf of non-leveled books. One uses a leveled books exclusively, and the other two don't have a lot of books for independent reading. It may be a coincidence, but the classroom where the students have access to non-leveled books seem to have the most joy in independent reading. So like you said, I'm not the classroom teacher and don't have much say, but she's making some observations about that. Another comment is that if a child picks Harry Potter and makes that accessible, don't assume they like magic. They may want, oh, like Hermione, not the magic. So they might be interested in those characters. Seen the movie. I was so inspired by this chapter because often when I see kids, especially if it's in the home, I'm asking the parent, what are they interested in? And there's actually such a limited array of things that are presented to them. And so if they say they like Elmo, they, and there's just a few of their toys, and then you're getting Elmo books, you're not really giving them greater opportunities. So I was so thrilled this week because I send out packages to the kids to go, wow, what kinds of books could I send to this young lady who probably doesn't only just like Elmo, and choose, National Geographic about animals, choose just other books about that have fun characters, and then yes, one Elmo book. There we go. But then she has choices.
Yeah. It's fun to think about. I feel like that even my home library has been growing since now that we're on week 7. I was like, wait a minute, do I need another bookshelf? When did I start acquiring all this? Oh, look at my Amazon bill. So yeah, as you get moving, you start thinking about all of that. All right, these are 3 quotes I liked, and I think these quote pages are just kind of fun and highlights. So never use reading levels to limit students' personal reading choices. And that's what I thought, On one hand, they want the content, they don't want so many unknown words. On the other hand, they don't want that to limit the choice. So I feel like that's going to be kind of a dynamic decision. And reading is not an art. And maybe it's one of those things where it's like, you know what, this is a book we're going to read together so that I can help you with the vocabulary, and this is one you can read on your own. And maybe those are not the same book. Reading is not an arduous task for most students if we don't make it so. And I was just thinking about, oh my gosh, I'm thinking about all the reading requirements at home for typical kids and signing off on charts for 20 minutes of reading, and how we've turned that into such a chore sometimes. Just by the accountability alone can make it a chore to the adults around them. So making sure that we are sending the right message when we want to take data, or we want to be sure it's part of the schedule. But if you turn it into a chore, then it's not arduous by nature unless we make it that way. I thought that's something to consider. And then creating an inviting reading environment helps make reading a routine part of life and not a chore. And I just thought that those were some highlights over those few pages where they're considering motivation. Any of this stand out for you guys?
So this happened this week in my own home. Reading has become a big chore for my 6-year-old, who's a very emergent reader. And so my husband, who hasn't usually read much in front of them, it's like maybe at nighttime or, we're all busy, said, I'm just going to sit down and make sure I make it a point of modeling, picking up a book and looking through it, just with no pressure of, just to give the idea of, you don't have to read, I'm not expecting you to read each word to me and all that, just to make it fun. And it was amazing because that did the trick, at least for one day. Thinking about that environment piece.
Yeah. One of the things I've been doing in teletherapy is setting up a step-by-step where kids are taking polls. And it's a little bit of would you rather, a little bit of step-by-step stuff. So it's like, hey, I'm doing teletherapy right now. I'm taking some data on books. And then they say, would you answer a few questions? They're doing this through the step-by-step. And there's a lot of reasons why we did this, but one of them is so that they would reach out to people outside their home and that they would find peers. And there was a lot of reasons around it, but we ended up taking data on what type of book do you like? You know, adventure, comic, and we list 4 or 5, and they would get to hear back about how different everyone is about what kinds of books they like. And then how do you like to do books? Do you like them read to you, or do you like to read by yourself? And we just had all these different questions. And so one of the things I was doing with that is, and then I was setting up a PowerPoint and doing a bar graph and all this stuff, you know, with a shared screen. And I was thinking, boy, look at all the people who said they like Pete the cat. And, you know, this is a really little kid, like a 3-year-old, and I said, let's learn about him. And so then we pull up one, right? And then somebody else said that they really like Sesame Street. And then I was like, let's check out Grover at the end of the book or whatever. Like, I'm using the step-by-step to start those conversations in the home about books, and then exposing, like, mom said she likes only true stories. So let's consider that. So we ended up finding this one about Walt Disney, and that was sort of his age level because he was about 8. And I was like, this is a true story, right? That means it actually happened. So it just gave us an opportunity to go with what was happening in the home, and how mom says she reads before she goes to bed because it helps her go to sleep. And dad said this, and we just have ways to bring awareness to that everybody has an opinion about books and everyone reads in some way. And that was kind of a fun activity to do. I kind of digressed on that. Sorry about that. Okay, so I liked this idea about one-to-one conferences. I thought that was fascinating. Where I thought it was fascinating because I love the example in there, and I'm actually going to do a little read aloud, read to you a little bit about what she said on that. But asking, what are you reading? What can you read a part of your page you liked out loud? And what kinds of texts do you like to read? And who else do you think you might like to read? Who else do you think might like to read this book? And I thought that was a great idea, because if somebody says, you should read this, you and I both go, oh, okay, if you recommend it, I want to try it because I know you, I like you, and if you like it, I might like it. And most of us don't even read books unless a friend says they liked it, right? So that made sense to me. And also I think that a teacher could say, let's read this, and they're like, eh. But then a peer could say, that's my favorite book, and it might ring differently. But I loved their example because it was a nonverbal, more of a eye gaze. So it says the one-to-one conferences could look like this. The teacher, what are you reading? And they eye point or they look to their lap, the book on their lap tray. And the teacher says, do you like it? And they look at their communication board and they say, like. I was thinking about core words and how many core words would you have to have on a page for a one-to-one conference? And I'm going to turn the pages, and stop me when you see the part you like. Again, I was like, oh, that's such a great way to adapt. Can you read part of the page you liked out loud? Is let's go through some pages, and when you get to your favorite page, show me that, react, give me a facial expression. So I point to stop. So they're eye gazing to the word stop. So right now we have like, maybe don't like, and stop. Tell me about it. And then the student points to go, and it's like, well, yes, in the story, he is going. The pigeon is driving the bus. He's going to school. Do you want to tell me more? And he eye gazes to the word finished. And who do you think would like to read this book? He goes to classmates. He eye gazes to Sue, to she. Do you mean Tashina? Tanisha? He smiles. Tanisha, come here. Jake thinks you might like this book. And the student eye gaze, you like this. Thanks, Jake. I can take it. Can I take it to read tomorrow? I want to finish reading Whose Toes Are Those and The Rain Feet Today. And he says, want. You want my books when I'm done? And he smiles. Great. Let's trade in the morning. I guess I don't need to ask what you'll be reading next. I mean, I just love that whole example, because sometimes this one-to-one conference makes complete sense when you think about a typical, or when you think about a child who's verbal. But then the example they gave was to modify for someone with very, you know, with limited access to language, and how interactive it actually was. Did you guys like that example as well, or did you have thoughts about that? Sorry for the read aloud. I know that you guys didn't require me to read that to you, but in case for some reason you didn't get to the book today, I didn't want you to leave the book study without hearing that example of alternative access.
I think it's helpful, and I think that's, you know, we all read the book, and then those are the kind of things that we want, those little tidbits of how can we really apply this to our kids. And I appreciate that they put those examples in there.
I know, it gives you a visual, right? Okay, so the other thing, I mean, this is just my last slide, because we're going to go into the groups right now, and we're going to, I'll have Sari talk about what the groups are going to do in just a minute. But I just wanted to know, in case sometimes we get back and people want to share and we don't get to the punchline, and I felt like this was critical in the chapter, and that was that relying on rewards to motivate reading makes students unlikely to read without those rewards. Instead of using rewards, encourage and celebrate reading. And I feel like that about reading, and I feel like that about communication. I'm not giving an example. I'm not saying good job communicating. I'm just responding to their language, and they're experiencing the excitement of connecting to another human being. That in itself is an inherent reward. When we're talking about reading, if we say good job reading, that we can say that, but honestly, there should be an inherent reward in reading and learning and pointing that out. You showed me how smart you are, and I learned about this when you were reading that, and I'm so excited. It makes me think of this, and it reminds me of that. And there's some encouraging, celebrating ways to make reading engaging. But yeah, if we set up where, you know, if the only way we get a kiddo to read is token system, and that's not applied at home or in another environment, then we have kind of turned it into a chore. And I think that there's always those kids that we have no other way, but it's really important that we keep trying to get away from reward based and make that inherently motivating, because it's about encouragement.
I'm sure there's ideas of how to celebrate reading, but I would love if people have ideas of how to make that shift, because I feel like from having kids growing up and thinking back on their reading, I feel like there was a lot of rewards versus celebrating the reading. So if people have ideas around celebrating reading and ways to do that, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, let's give people just a minute to either respond or write in the text about ideas of encouragement or celebrating reading.
I think it depends on if it's a shared reading experience. I think there's a lot of intrinsic reward, just like you were saying about communication back and forth. But if you're doing shared reading with a student, that's awfully reinforcing to have the attention of a staff member or a peer or a buddy. That is a reward in and of itself, when maybe students with severe disabilities don't get those opportunities. So generating a social reward in sort of a way is sort of a different way of looking at reward, but it is reinforcing and probably wonderful for that student.
Sure. So I think, you know, the self-directed reading, I think that's where that one-to-one conference becomes the reward of the self-directed reading, right? Like that social interaction after they've done something on their own it should be inherently rewarding, right? Rather than testing for knowledge so much, it should just be inherently encouraging.
And then I was thinking in a small group setting, if, you know, sort of like author's chair type of setup, where a student might be able to read before a small group, but then it's sort of the old round of applause for our author today, you know, and just that little praise. It is a reward, but it's not like a candy or something, you know, it's sort of a group acknowledgement that was exciting for all of us, kind of thing.
Right.
There's a few great comments in the chat. One being around the 10-year-old boy who at night after reading loves to talk all about what's been read. And she said, even though it's kind of a stall tactic for getting to bed, just encouraging that dialogue. And I was thinking of how much our kids, being a mom, and students crave attention, and what positive attention that is to be sharing that story with them and letting them talk about it, just as in the example. And then let's see, I lost part of the chat, but encouraging, let's see, setting up an encouraging environment, giving students their own book to take home when possible, maybe with donations, and also maybe having a reading buddy to share with. I think we need to show kids that reading is exciting, maybe adding prompts that engage them, make the topics personal. How does it relate to them in their life, and be excited about the book.
So Siri, go ahead and let us know what we're doing in the group today, because we're going to divide you guys up. We have a document just on feedback last time. We have an activity, and you're going to know your group number, I hope. So you're going to be filling out just the part of your group, and that way you're not distracted when other people are adding to the same chart. But basically at the end, each group will have a chart of ideas, and some of the ideas may be the same. But go ahead, Siri.
So Brenda, if you put us into 6 groups, I think that'll work. And
okay.
We are looking at a few slides back in Brenda's presentation. We talked about a variety of common predictable text structures can be used to support emergent beginning readers during that self-directed time. And they talk about core word books, question and answer books, kind of like, she gave an example, but it's kind of like Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus, right? The character's asking a question and the other characters respond. Cumulative sequence, so there's something that happens and then you add more information to that sequence each time, and then you repeat the sequence, the next page, a new piece of information is added. As I'm talking about these, you're probably thinking of books that you know that might fit into these, which is great. Predictable pattern books. Like they talked about, it could be an opposites book. So on this, here's an opposite, and then you lift the flap and here's a word, and then you lift the flap and it's an opposite. Or an alphabet book, and it's going to have an A, and the next page it's going to tell you sounds or letters or words and things that go along with it. Repeated line text. I think we all know a lot of these. There's an example here of not a box. And then I think, also this first word, the core word book, there's a link to like, not like in Tar Heel Reader, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then wordless books. I know that a lot of us have our favorite wordless books. So what I was thinking is that we can brainstorm books that fit these categories, because we might have some shared book experiences, but we also might have some new takeaways that will be helpful for each other. And one of the ways we can do that is just things that we know already, but also in Tar Heel Reader, because we are looking for accessible books for a lot of students, there are ways to look for books. You can look in collections or and search by certain topics or authors, or you could put in, like if you're looking for core word books, you could put that in. And I'm just going to tell you a few. The DLM is dynamic learning maps. If you search in Tar Heel Reader for those collections, that's mentioned in, I'm just going to go here so we can, that's mentioned in the book. Read a Book is another author, and that's David Copenhaver, one of the authors of this book. That's his pen name, so you'll know kind of what you're getting when you find those books. And Jane Farrell's another good resource. Has done a lot of books, and obviously in Tar Heel Reader, anybody can contribute. So, but sometimes you kind of want to narrow it down to some ideas, right? So then I thought you can look in Tar Heel Reader. If I go to home, there's find a book, or you can search collections. So I could put DLM, dynamic learning maps. I want to see for 3rd grade, some ideas maybe. Or you could type in core vocabulary books. But search through some books and you could see, where do you think that fits? Is that kind of a repetitive line? Is it some of those others like cumulative sequence or what you know already? So one person in the group can volunteer to take notes on here and maybe.
Yeah, so just if you could, everyone click on that doc now, so that if you get into a group, one of you, we know that at least one of you has actually done what we just said, so that you can write down people's ideas. Okay, we're only going to take 10 minutes here. So it's not going to be long or painful, and we're just going to have people brainstorm and then go ahead and you can Google Tar Heel Reader, and if you want to go that route, or if you just want to brainstorm regular books, it all works out. Does that sound good, Sari?
That's it.
All righty, here we go. So go ahead and join your group.
Great.
So we clicked on the like, don't like, so that we could see that one. And then we went through and searched a few books and just talked about the program itself.
Great. I mean, yeah, if your group digresses and it's what your people want to do, perfect.
It was very helpful. So thank you.
Yeah, if you don't know Tar Heel Reader, let's start there. We're doing this book study in the fall, and we're doing one chapter a month, because we're also doing like a webinar on Tar Heel Reader and a webinar on various different programs, like full hours on these different things that are mentioned throughout the book. So yeah, I mean, we got to know what the tools we have. Okay, who is in room 2? Anybody want to speak about this?
We were just stating books that came to mind in different topics. So we didn't go out to look other places, but we're just kind of categorizing books that we knew about.
Yeah. I love repeated line text because I think it lends itself to shared reading, and you can have single message buttons or step-by-step set up so that shared reading happens. So I love seeing those ideas about things.
I love that you guys gave the like how to. I just Googled some of the lists you gave, and it's like you can just find like all kinds of wordless books, and I was just like, oh my gosh, that's like the easiest thing in the world, just knowing the words to Google to find these books. So, and all in one place, I'm like, oh my goodness, that is like a huge resource now. So I'm excited about that.
True, the vernacular is important, isn't it?
It is.
Oh, look at room 3. They just put all kinds of links. So later, when you guys want to open up this document, you might just click on some of these links.
Yeah, we put links to some books in Tar Heel Reader. And then someone mentioned that through Boardmaker Online, if you have a subscription, you get Core First books in Reading Avenue, and they're using those books. And we also someone mentioned that, can you, in the like repeated line text, like the Eric Carle books and things like that, they just noticed how it increases commenting so much.
I know it says wordless books, but the other famous book is the book without pictures, which is funny too. All right, room 4. Anyone want to comment about that?
We just listed some books that we could think of off the top of our heads that we had either read recently or that we had like children that had really enjoyed. And one person in our group had noted that she just like copy and pasted the titles for these sections you guys have in here and put that into Google and found that she got really great lists. So we were like, oh, that's a great idea for like when you're looking for these. It's nice to just have the specific language that will get you the hits that you want instead of having to think of what was that kind of book called.
Yeah. No, that's great. Room 5, anyone want to weigh in?
Well, this is Rose. I was the note taker because I was able to get into the document, and then right off the bat, our group was just throwing out titles, and one of our gals, and I forgot your name, she actually was pulling books off and showing them like she had the real books in front of her. So I was like, so we had lots of people that work with young children or have young children and knew a lot of titles. We talked a lot about series books too, where there was, a topic, but then there's lots of spin-offs on that one book or series of ones that do that. So we never got to Tar Heel Reader either, which would have been awesome as well. But it was fun just to brainstorm and hear what people already knew about, just fun titles. Anyone else want to chime in more about our discussion?
No, and I agree. And I really liked the wordless books, especially the enthusiasm over the umbrella and the elephant buttons. Those sounded great.
Oh yeah. Hey, can you just share about the umbrella book, whoever had that in their little hip pocket? That is such a cute share out if you haven't seen that. Is that too much to ask?
The elephant book or the yellow umbrella?
Well, I was kind of partial to the elephant book.
Okay. Yeah. So the elephant book can, I can't really see if I'm holding it there.
Yeah, that's good. There
Okay.
you go.
So this Elephant Buttons is an adorable wordless picture book that kids absolutely enjoy. In every picture, the elephant's got buttons. And so a smaller animal comes out each time, and they all have little buttons. And so the animals keep getting smaller, and you ask the kids, like, who do you think's gonna come next? And at the very end, you've got down to a little mouse, and then who's gonna come out? And a lot of times my favorite response is like a bug, a spider, an elephant comes out. This is one of my favorite books, and I lost a copy quite a long time ago. My stepmom bought it for me off of eBay for like $40, but my old one I got from like a bargain bin. This one I think came from eBay for like $40. So they're hard to find, but if you ever see one at the library, definitely get it because kids love it.
Thank you.
All right, I think room 6 is our last group. I'm sorry, it's 1. We're kind of cutting you guys short. Anybody want to mention anything from group 6? So I guess I love everything you guys did. I'm wondering if something valuable may be, if anyone wants to take this chart and consider older ages. Most of the brainstorm today was younger kids and younger ages, and I'm wondering if the most valuable homework this week might be to consider how would I fill this out if I was working with middle school students, and how would I fill this out if I was working with high school students. What a resource that would be for those of us who end up treating all age groups, because I think that might take more thought than 10 minutes, and we all are experienced with this kind of looking at books in this way for those younger kids. But so that's, I guess, my challenge for you. And if you do, you can either turn that into a book snap, which would be ideal, and that would just mean screenshotting that chart and putting it on a slide, because I think that the challenge is, as they get older, how do we continue to meet all of those needs for our kids, maybe 5th grade and up. All right, that's a wrap, guys. It's 1:02, and thank you guys for coming. Thanks for sticking around.